University of Chicago Public Policy Podcast.
Hi listeners, welcome to UC3P. I'm Susan Pakin, one of the UC3P production managers. This week we're excited to bring you a very special Valentine's Day edition of Naked Love, our love and relationship podcast. This episode looks at hookup culture through a policy and analytical lens, and features interviews and anecdotes from students across the UChicago campus. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to UC3P on iTunes and Spreaker, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and our new Instagram account for all the latest updates. Happy Valentine's Day, and enjoy this special episode of Naked Love.
Memorable,
disappointing,
exclusive,
Desperate. Messy. Overhyped.
Abysmal. What did we ask these students to describe hookup culture at UChicago?
This is Naked Love, the Valentine's Day edition, a podcast where policy meets love and relationships.
We are your hosts,
Katie James
and Ivanna Shevel. As you might have guessed, today we will be talking about hookup culture on campus here, both at the college and the Harris School of Public Policy.
So something that we thought was really interesting when we were asking people their thoughts about hookup culture was we were met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah, people were very hesitant to share their thoughts and opinions. I think it's also really interesting that for the most part, it was the men we interviewed that didn't want to participate in anything related to discussing hookup culture here. It was almost like pulling teeth with a lot of the people we interviewed.
Yeah, I agree. Like, overall, the answers we got and the vibe was negative towards hookup culture. Why is that?
I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out. Let's hear from some freshmen at the college to see what they think.
So, if you could state your name.
Sam Nitkin.
Cool. What are your pronouns?
He, him, his.
And what's your sexual identity?
Straight.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Franziska Harling, and I'm here with the Naked Love podcast. Today, we'll be interviewing Sam, who's a first year in the college. Sam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's dive right in.
Okay.
What's your definition of hooking up?
This is such a difficult question, and it's a really ambiguous term, I believe. I think there are three things hooking up can mean. The first is making out with someone. The second is like going back to their place or them coming back to your place, and maybe you guys spend the night together or something. And the third is sex. And so when someone says to me like, oh, I hooked up with someone, I always have to clarify with them. And I think it's a bad term. Just flex on us. Like, tell us what you mean.
And what would you say hookup culture is?
Hookup culture is things that are in place that make it easier for people to hook up, like parties and alcohol.
Cool.
They are cool.
And do you think UChicago's environment fosters hooking up?
I mean, this is the classic joke, right? Something, UChicago hookup culture. I think probably less than other schools, definitely talking to a lot of my friends from high school who go to big state schools. They have hookup culture. I have a friend who was studying in the library and sat down next to a girl, and they were just working on like the same engineering project, and all of a sudden she was like, hey, what if we did this in your room? And he was like, okay. Oh, wow. And then they had sex. And I don't think that could ever happen here at the University of Chicago, because if you're in a library, you are studying, and you are only going to study because that's the culture here. It is not a hookup culture. That being said, there are places at the University of Chicago you can go if you're more inclined to hook up, I believe. I think it's not impossible to have hookups here, but it's definitely more difficult than at a lot of other colleges.
Do you hook up here at UChicago?
I have had several hookups, meaning making out like at a party, and one hookup beyond that.
What percentage of UChicago students do you think hook up regularly?
Well, am I a tour guide? now? Like, what is our yield rate? Is this what the kids want to know these days?
We want it for the brochure next year.
For the brochure?
Yeah.
The hookup percentage?
Yeah.
Which definition of hookup?
Again, do you want to do 3 different figures?
Sure. 40%, 20%, 19%.
Wow. 40% making out.
Have made out with someone here at the University of Chicago.
Only
yes.
40%.
At a party? Like a one-time thing, not like a relationship. Do you think that sounds
low to me, yeah.
Nerds. Can I ask you what you would guess?
Yes, you may. I would guess 60, 40, 35.
You have a lot of faith in the UChicago student body.
I do. And do you think the majority of hookups here lead to either long-term relationships or long-term hooking up stints? Or do you think the majority are just one-time things?
I think the majority are one-time things because in order for it to be a long-term stint, both parties have to want it to be a long-term stint. So I think there might be several occasions where one party would wish for it to continue and the other party does not. But that would also be a one-time thing. It's like a Punnett square, with the recessive and dominant traits where not wanting to continue hooking up is dominant. So even if it's one big hookup and one small hookup, you have a 25% chance of it continuing and 75% chance of it not continuing.
And do you think most people want to be in relationships or want these one-time things? Specifically here.
I'm not sure. I wish I knew.
Would that help?
I wish I knew about myself. What? Who said that? It depends person to person. I think a lot of people are looking for something, stable, someone who can intellectually challenge them as well as romantically or sexually. Yeah, I believe the life of the mind philosophy tends towards people who are looking for more stable long-term relationships.
So keeping that in mind, do you think most people hook up in the hopes of getting into a relationship?
No. I think if you're looking to get into a long-term relationship, you're going to look at people who you see on a regular basis and that you have an emotional connection with, and not some guy you see across the room at bar night and you can't even talk to because it's too loud. So you just decide to put your ass on him. Like, I don't think that's how people are looking for relationships. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would not be my guess.
And I just want to go back to this point again. You don't even know about yourself whether you want to hook up with people or want to be in a relationship. That's really interesting to me. Do you think most people are like that?
I think when you first start off college, I'll talk about myself. I'm not going to generalize other people. Starting off at college, I was aware I want to become my own person and make friends and develop who I am in like my own schedule first. And then if I want to add someone else onto that who would be a major component of my life, I want to have this established routine, this foundation to begin with, so that if a lot of relationships don't end so well, that my entire life here doesn't come crumbling down if that relationship were to end. A relationship that started very early on in my college career, because I am a first year. However, that is a sentiment I've heard echoed by some other people, both here and at other schools.
That you're going to use the first few months to kind of get into the groove of things, maybe hook up with people, have some fun, and then open yourself up to potential relationships.
Yeah, you want to establish yourself first. That being said, being in a relationship is nice. That's why people do it. Yeah. I'm sure I would enjoy it if I were, or maybe I wouldn't, and I would end that relationship. But I have in me these conflicting wants, but I try not to think about it too much.
What is your opinion specifically on hookup culture here at UChicago?
It's fine. It is what you make it. Can I extend this a little bit more to party culture?
Sure.
Because I think parties and hookups are pretty closely related. I'm aware that if I was at another school, perhaps I would be peer pressured a lot to go out more, to drink more, to smoke more, to try to get girls more. And here, I get to make those decisions more for myself. I don't really feel myself being pressured by other people, and that is perhaps healthier for me. Not sure if it's more fun. In addition, with the parties here, especially when you go to a big party, you know, the people who are going to go to frat parties are going to be like mostly first and second years. Those who don't have apartments, they're going to be the same portion of the student body that's outgoing, which is perhaps less than half. And it's not a very large school to begin with. So I do think you see a lot of the same people at a lot of the same parties. And that it's nice to meet new people. It's nice to not have to go to a party and be like, oh, these people again. And perhaps that part is upsetting to me. But I am okay with party culture and hookup culture at the University of Chicago. I mean, I chose it, and I live with those choices every day.
Sam, thank you so much for talking to me. This was really insightful.
I'm glad I got to share. I hope my mom doesn't listen to this, and that no one takes what I said too seriously.
Okay, well, that was very interesting hearing from some of our own freshmen here at the college. I just want to talk a little bit more about what Sam was saying. I found it very interesting that he thought only a small percentage of people were participating in the hookup culture here. That seems to be quite, I guess, overhyped. I personally would characterize the hookup culture here as all talk, no action, because I think I hear about a lot of people being very active participants, but I also hear people admit that they're not personally participating. So there's a little bit of a mismatch in what I hear and what's actually happening.
And I also think when people are like overhyping their situationships, it's people younger, like first and second years, that really discuss with friends about this type of situation.
Yeah, I definitely get the feeling that freshmen and sophomores have a little bit more incentive to maybe exaggerate their involvement in the hookup culture. But what I think is particularly interesting is that I was reading a poll by the Chicago Maroon conducted by Doc Chauhan in September of 2018. And I was very surprised to read that actually 1/3 of students at the college are currently, at the time, were in committed relationships. And as many as 80% said that they preferred a serious relationship to casual hookups. Is that what your experience has been here at UChicago or no?
In my experience of UChicago, coming as a freshman, a lot of people maybe were drawn to the fact of relationships, but the reality was I saw not a lot of relationships and a lot of casual situations. And even now, being a second year, it's a little bit more relationships, but still mostly the casual.
Yeah, and I think the reason we heard so many negative comments and negative opinions about the hookup culture here is that as people were getting a little bit more tired of casual hookups freshman, sophomore year and trying to transition into something more serious in their junior and sophomore years, that transition probably didn't go very well for a lot of people from hookups to relationships, because a big problem with that is what in policy is known as asymmetric information. Katie, could you explain that for us?
Yeah, of course. Asymmetric information. Well, it's a scenario with two people involved in hookup culture but wanting something more serious. As a person, you really only know your own preferences, desires, and wants, and you don't know the other preferences of the other person, which makes things a little difficult. These asymmetric information really presents itself as a prisoner's dilemma. So you really have, there's the chance that you profess your love or whatever it may be to the other person and you don't give that back, and that's a huge risk. And the safest option is, well, neither of you obviously confess, and then who really gets hurt?
So you're saying essentially that there's more risk in admitting your feelings and your desire of pursuing a more serious relationship to a hookup and them not reciprocating your feelings. There's a higher chance that in that scenario you will be hurt, as opposed to nobody saying anything about what they actually want. And that way, there's probably less chance of it being awkward if your feelings aren't reciprocated and the other person doesn't want to pursue a more serious relationship but prefers more of a casual hookup situation. So I think a lot of people had negative experiences trying to transition.
And I also think these negative experiences really reinforce them in the position of staying in this hookup culture, because they're so used to like the similar behaviors over and over again. And if it's really not like hurting them, then why would they change with this incentive of just staying there?
Right. I think even from my personal experience, it's you put yourself in a very vulnerable position when a lot of the discussions around you, I hear people say, oh, this is UChicago, it's so intense, I barely have time to do my readings, there's no way I could possibly form and sustain a serious committed relationship. And because everyone seems to be talking about that, I think a lot of people, even if they do want a more serious